anti-war leader since 1968, community worker, organizer, and longtime participant in the Chicano movimiento in actions to date. And today is his birthday. So let's give a big round of applause and a happy birthday, orale, to Rosalio Munoz.
Hello, actually it's not my birthday, but thanks anyway. I'm 75, June 29th is my birthday. But I want to first, we talked about those that died, and we should mention they died at the hands of the police. And it was deliberate. They deliberately attacked the crowd and were shooting into them. And I think they deliberately assassinated Ruben Salazar. We were remembering then, but I want to remember especially today, one of our organizers who was at one of our meetings about a month ago here in the park to start planning this event. He was there, wanted to work with the youth, get them out of this, come from the high schools and all of that. That's what he did 51 years ago, organizing for the Chicano Moratorium, and he was a fabulous guy who went out. He went to almost every school, every college, every junior college, and he would ask people, where is there going to be a community meeting? So he and I, because I was the one that had a car and we were driving around, so many people first heard about the Chicano Moratorium, about the next event, the next thing, from Bobby Elias. He was good with the press, and he was wonderful with young people and getting people excited about moving. And he gave 7 or 8 months of his life to whatever we needed to do. And he died. When he came to that meeting a month ago, he was in the 4th stage of cancer. He didn't tell us. And we were happy to see him, and we were wanting to work with him these last weeks. So I'd just like to have a moment of silence for Bobby Elias. Okay. I wanted to also say I'm really happy that we had Gloria Ariana speak. She was the strongest leading woman, first with the Brown Berets to organize against the war, and then becoming with the Chicano Moratorium, formed a group of women to the first kind of Chicana feminists. She says, we didn't think we were feminists then, but we are now, and marched in the second moratorium, and then became one of the leaders in organizing, going out and speaking. You know, when the guys were maybe in the hall talking politics, drinking beer, the women were organizing on how can we get more people, how can we deal with the logistics of those problems. And then she was in charge of housing all the people that came from out of state, with the help of some of the other great Chicanas like Julia Alatorre and Irene Tovar and others. But she was a dynamic person. She designed the first Chicano Moratorium lessons, went out and got the okay from the police or the sheriffs to get those marching permits. She was doing all the things that the guys didn't want to do, but had to be done, and she got them done. And that's Gloria Arianes. And I'm so happy she told us about the Tongva people, because we said a lot about this is our land. And yes, a lot of us were from tribes in Mexico of different levels of so-called civilization, but the land here was in the hands, in this city, of the Tongva and others, and you can go out. So we have to have that awareness. She told us about how they see the spirits in the trees, in the animals, and everything else that have to be respected and acknowledged. And they're not with the kind of philosophy that human beings are above nature, and that has us heading to where we could be extinct with taking with us so many other species. So that is the knowledge that they have that we need to acknowledge in this city. It wasn't the Spaniards coming and colonizing. The Tongva were here, and actually they were forced to do the work that kept the economy growing, so this became a town and then a city. So we need to remember those things, because as she said, we are all indigenous. I just want to make some observations of the moratorium. What are some of the key lessons? And I've always, after a few years, looked, there were two things. There was what we did as subjects of living people that were wanting to have our place in the world, that were wanting to add something to the human race, that we were taught by our parents and their grandparents that we were here to make this a better place for our community and for everyone. And that's the spirit that we had in organizing for Chicano power, for empowerment, in order to live lives with respect and decency and not have to be killers and wars anymore. So that were things that we did. Then there were the things that they did against us. They deliberately attacked us. They did not want us to be successful. They wanted to have more and more of our soldiers getting killed in Vietnam, and all kinds of soldiers were leaving. One of the reasons Vietnam had to end that war, Nixon and all of them, they did a lot of bombing, but more and more the soldiers were not fighting. And our soldiers, after we demonstrated, they weren't either. They were all saying, this is not our war. And so they couldn't keep that war going. And our demonstrations, people around the world, and especially the Vietnamese people, they won that war, and we were able to stop then, and we can stop wars now. I personally think we should not be in Afghanistan getting out. We messed things up going in, and they're a little messed up going out, but thank God we're going out. There's so many other wars we have to be against. But what was done against us was horrendous and planned, as I mentioned. But at the start, they kind of knocked us down. We might have been a little groggy or PTSD for a while. But we got up off the ground and started fighting back against the media, against the history books, and everything to demand Chicano power and to demand a role in influencing this to be a better world. And now we didn't have representation. The ones we had were among the first ones to oppose the war in Vietnam. George Brown, who represented East LA, donated an office to the Chicano Moratorium. And he was the first one to vote against the war and was joined by Ed Roybal. And then finally, when we were sick and tired of that war, as Hilda said her father was, so many of the parents and others, we went against the war. So in the long run, what mattered most was not what they did to us. It's important that we know that and we're ready for it, and we have been getting better, but what we started out and why we wanted to do this, to make a better world for ourselves and everybody else. So that has been, and one of the key things that we did that kept our movement going and keeps it going, we said back then, our front line is not in Vietnam, but in the struggle for social justice and peace in the barrios and in our country. And you were pointing out that it wasn't just the war, but it was all of these ways of discrimination and putting us down, putting us in the pecking order with other people, and that we fought against. And it's what they call now institutional racism, and that we say more and more white supremacy is behind that. And that is now being fought out in the country. But we've been making progress against those ideas, against those practices ever since. So the war in Vietnam was an issue that was like a key link that got us to take on the whole problems that they were forcing upon our community. So what are the main issues now? We are coming out of a pandemic. The system wants us to make more sacrifices like we've had to, but we're fighting. We want a new normal of social justice, and so there are laws for labor rights that are being proposed, laws that are about immigrant rights, laws that are about voting rights, etc., in the Congress to make a stronger democracy in this country. But we have another big problem of the right-wing Republicans, really, fascist-oriented, that are trying to stop any progress and keep on moving us backward. So we are very important that we take part in moving a progressive agenda with voting rights, infrastructure, labor rights, immigrant rights, and all from here on out. And to me, the key link, like I said, the war in Vietnam is with us right now, right here in East LA, in Los Angeles, Southern California, statewide. And that is the recall that they're trying to pull on the governor, but actually the kind of policies that are starting to be made that are against racism, that are for immigrant rights, that are for health care for everyone. That's what the recall started even before he took office. And it was against the policies and the people that he began representing more with our representatives, like some that'll be speaking here today later on. So we have just 16 days to get out the vote. And I think that our dedication these next 16 days, we should get out and vote ourselves and get our neighbors, our family, and others out to vote. There are now polls that show there's a big lead against the recall, and if we slaughter that recall, it will move the politics for democracy further. And
right,
I know I've gone over. So let's go against the recall.
Let's hear it for Rosalio. All right. Moving right along. The Chicano Moratorium. Everybody having a good time here at Belvedere Park? Did you get your raspadas and your sanditas? No? And what about the tacos?